So we're going to start off with the research task, and as you can see here in the scenario booklet, it's worth 6 marks. The research task says this: collect information and pictures about the type of souvenirs your shop could sell. Keep a log and evidence of your sources of information and store this information in appropriate folders. You may use online or non-electronic methods of collecting data. So let's break that down. First of all, it says I've got to collect information and pictures. So there's a clear distinction there between whether I go and get an image for my research or whether I go and get some text, which is the information. It says about the type of souvenirs your shop could sell. So right there it's telling me that you, the student, can choose what it is you want to sell as your souvenirs. Okay, so it could be sports memorabilia, it could be a keyring, it could be key rings, it could be anything that people might collect. So think of things that you collect, things that you've got an interest in. And if you're not sure whether they are what we would class as souvenirs, then you need to make sure you come and see your teacher to clarify whether they are classed as souvenirs. You might want to just do a Google search for souvenirs or memorabilia and see what sort of images come up to give you an idea of the types of things that would be classed as souvenirs. You've also got to keep a log and evidence of your sources. So that means any information or pictures that you gather, you've got to keep a log somewhere of where you got that information or that picture from. So if you're going to do all of your research electronically, i.e. you're going to do it using the internet, then you need to keep somewhere a log of the web addresses that you've visited, the sources of the information and pictures that you've gathered. It says here that you've got to store the information in appropriate folders. So it says initially that you should have set up a folder structure, and we should have done that in lesson time. And so this is going to be a homework task, obviously, because you'll have to do the research section at home. So what you need to do is you need to collect the information and pictures, and then store it somewhere, maybe on a USB pen, making sure that you're keeping an account of the sources, i.e. the URL where you got them from. And then when you bring them into class, you need to store them during the control conditions time. You need to store those images or information somewhere sensible, so maybe in a research folder. So you would put the pictures, for example, in a research folder, and put a word processed document with any information and sources, i.e. where you got that information and pictures, in that document. Again, if you don't have to do it using the internet. You can collect data about products from other methods as well. So this is that's the scenario booklet, but this is the mark criteria. So let's have a look at exactly what it is we've got to do. So first of all, we've got to show the examiner evidence of 6 things. We need to get 6 marks here. We've got to show one of 6 of these 7 things here. So use of online information sources. So that means I've got to prove to the examiner that I've actually gone online and found information. Okay, I'll show you how we go about this in just a minute. You've also got to show the examiner that you've used a URL for a purpose. Now what's really important about that is you understand what a URL is. So for example, it means that you're not going to Google and just searching for things. It means you actually have remembered a web address, www.etc.com, or you've maybe bookmarked or added to your favorites a URL address, and you're revisiting that URL to go and get some information. So it's very clear to me, and it needs to be very clear to you, that in order to evidence this, you don't use a search engine to find the information. You use the URL. You've then got to actually show that you don't have to do these in any logical order, they just need to be done. So you've then got to show evidence that you can use search engines for different purposes. So you're going to have to show the examiner that the process you've been through when using a search engine to find one piece of information, and then maybe do the same process again to show him or her how you used a search engine to find a different piece of information or a picture. You've got to manage and use references to make it easier to find information again. So again, that's showing evidence to the examiner that you've used bookmarks or favourites in a web browser, so that you're actually managing your information to make it easy to access again later on. You've also got to show the examiner that you can download, organise and store different types of information. So in terms of different types of information, to me that would be, for example, a picture is information and text is information. You can find those information. You can find information in PDF documents. You can find information in the file format of sound, of a video. So you need to show the examiner that you found different types of information and that you've downloaded that information, organized it, so you've put it in a sensible folder structure, and then actually stored it in that file structure. So to evidence this, you can, different types could be just two. So you can say, here I've downloaded a picture from the web that I'm going to use in my catalogue, but I've also found some information from the web that I'm going to also use in my catalogue. Again, data collected from printed sources. So what that means is it doesn't mean go on the web and then print it out and say, oh, I found this. It means you've actually got to find something that you wouldn't or haven't found on the internet. So it might be that you've gone into a memorabilia shop, which there are many of. I know there's one in the Dubai Mall near Kidzania, where you can get collectibles and memorabilia, and actually got some information from a different source other than the internet. So you would need some sort of booklet or some sort of flyer to evidence that, and you would literally just get that, and maybe just write a few sentences about how you might use that later on in your catalogue or your presentation. And here, data collected from other people. So what that means is it doesn't necessarily have to be a printed source. It doesn't have to be a leaflet or a flyer. It might be that your friend collects souvenirs or memorabilia, and that person knows information about that memorabilia, and maybe you could just document that through the write-up of an interview or a meeting, or some written documentation that they've given you about that memorabilia. So again, you've only got to choose 6 of them, but it's very important you actually have written documentation of those 6 pieces, or 6 of those research and design tasks. So how do we go about it? Well, let's say, for example, I'm going to show you these 5. Now I can't show you creating a video like this how I would go about doing these 2. So let's say everyone must do these 5 here, and then choose one of these here for your 6th mark. And I'm going to show you how to complete these 5 if I were doing your project.